o'clock. So I think by now most of you know who I am. My name is Drew Palmer and I am Governor Gordon's Grants Integration Manager. And I have to put glasses on. I don't even need glasses. So today, we have so many people that are good at this subject that we didn't have enough spaces on the panel, but we've got a lot of expertise also in the audience. So we have Doug Miyamoto, who is with the Wyoming Department of Ag, Holly Kennedy with the Wyoming Association of Conservation Districts, Jackie Byam, who is USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service, and Cynthia Detloff, with the Department of Ag, USDA Rural Development. Also in the room, we have USDA Farm Service Agency. Please raise your hand. Thank you. They have an awful lot of programs that we know are available for agriculture. We'll talk about drought. We'll talk about wildfire. We'll talk about some of those things and how they impact the agriculture industry. And I would be remiss if I also didn't recognize Brian Jensen with NRCS, who works with Jackie. Jackie is the state director. So they will go down, we'll give presentations to start with, and they will explain a little bit more about their specific roles in each of their agencies. And then we're gonna open it up for questions. We want a lot of dialogue. I've got questions, but you've been listening to me all morning. So what I'm really hoping is that you all have questions. And let's talk about those programs that you're looking for and that you need, because USDA provides a lot of federal funding programs for those things you're looking for. So, without further ado, Director Miyamoto, hit it.
This will be a little anticlimactic compared to that introduction, but I'll do my best. I hope that you all are having a good day. Again, my name is Doug Miyamoto. I'm the director of the Wyoming Department of Agriculture. Not sure what everybody's familiarity is with that state agency. It's primarily a regulatory agency, unfortunately. But it's one of those that we regulate things like feeds and fertilizers. We also do food safety. It surprises a lot of people. We do gasoline. We do public swimming, if you can believe that. So that's our regulatory component. And then on the other side of the equation, we also do a lot of advocacy work. And so a lot of that entails the policy work of the Department of Ag, where we will interact with our federal counterparts on mostly Bureau of Land Management and Forest Service grazing issues and multiple use issues on federal lands in Wyoming. As most of you know, about half of Wyoming is federally administered, so agriculture is impacted more than most industries, or maybe some industries, because of that relationship. But it leads to some interesting challenges for agriculture in Wyoming, and we have recently spent a great deal of time talking about the barriers in agriculture for Wyoming producers and what that's going to look like over the next several years. And so last year, we spent about half of last year carrying through on a new initiative of Governor Gordon's, and it was called the Cowboy State Agriculture Initiative. And it was a group of about a dozen people that were tasked with identifying barriers to implementation or barriers to continued success in the ag sector of Wyoming. And then what we tried to do was give the governor a whole bunch of alternatives that he might be able to pursue to try to address some of the challenges that we see coming forward around the corner in agriculture in Wyoming. So the way this always starts off about having these broad discussions about ag in Wyoming, it's always very interesting, but the way I like to frame it would be to ask all of you to imagine in your mind's eye what this state would look and feel like if you didn't have agriculture in the way that we have over the past decades. So much of the look and feel of Wyoming is tied to its agriculture. Its heritage is tied to its agriculture. If you didn't have all those ranch lands that were out there, what would be the draw for tourists? What would your wildlife resources look like without agriculture? What would the interplay with all of your Forest Service resources, your BLM lands, and even National Park Service with Yellowstone even have the same draw if you didn't have agriculture out there. So those are the kinds of challenges that we're thinking about as we went into this initiative for the Cowboy State Agriculture Initiative. And really what we were able to do was bring together a lot of industry experts. We brought in educational experts from the University of Wyoming, Wyoming Ag in the Classroom, our industry folks that were specific to grazing, as an example. That was one of them. Farm Bureau Federation, or just closer.
Yes.
Does that help? Okay. Sorry about that. Usually I've been told I'm too loud. So I'm a little sensitive about that. But yeah, we had a group of people that really have been in the state for a long time and have been involved in agriculture for quite a while. Jim McGagna is one. I think he is in his 30th year at the helm of the Wyoming Stock Growers Association. So it's a pretty good feel for, kind of the evolution of that industry. So we all got together and we were talking about what are the important things for agriculture and what's this going to look like? How can we create a culture or a environment that is more advantageous to the next generation of agriculturalists compared to what we have today? So we broke this down really into 4 key areas. And the first one that we always land on is, how are we going to ensure that the next generation of farmers and ranchers can afford to get in the business? Price of land is extraordinarily high. Generally speaking, if you don't inherit that operation, you're not going to be able to do it. And so that's a challenge for all the states in the union, not just Wyoming, but it's one that we talked about. I think Wyoming just passed a threshold that the average age of a farmer or rancher in Wyoming just surpassed 60 years of age. That's terrifying. We're not unique in that. I mean, most of the states in the union, when you get the chance to take over, when the kids take over the ranch, they're typically 60 years old. And, you have an 85-year-old man that now he's just tired of it and probably tired of the kids too. But the reality of it is, most of those guys are still hanging on in their mid-80s and they don't want to give up control of the decision-making. They know what's best for the cows, and if you try to do something different, then you have a family problem on your hand. But it leads to a challenge about how do you do this transfer, and how do people get into farming and ranching that aren't already in it? So we talked about that, and all of the USDA and state loan programs, age management for agriculture operations are their ideas that we could come up with. And we did quite a bit of digging into the Office of State Lands and Investments. They have programs for beginning farmers and ranchers. NRCS does as well. FSA has some programs that are geared that way. RD probably does as well. I mean, all of us as agencies recognize that this is a giant problem. It's one that's not easily solved. So how can we make those state interest rates more competitive? How can we structure the loans to reflect or better match up with your income streams as a farmer or rancher when you get into that sector? We need repayment terms that match the jerkiness of payments. Like a lot of people, you may only get 1 or 2 paychecks a year essentially. You sell the hay, you sell the cows, whatever that may look like. But a lot of times your income is not very dependable that way. So we discussed a whole bunch of options that way, and we have some legislative initiatives that might be forthcoming to address that a little bit. Number 2, water. That one shows up everywhere. But when you talk about ag in Wyoming, you need to talk about water. If you were listening to the other concurrent session that just got done with the municipal water supplies, essentially the same issues challenge agriculture that they do in town, which is we have a system in Wyoming where the state owns the water, but if you don't use it, you'll lose it. So how do we fight this battle with the downstream states on the Colorado River Basin or any other basin? We're the headwaters of 7 major drainages here in Wyoming. It's nice to be at the top of the hill. I mean, when it comes to water allocation, we are incredibly dry out here, particularly this year. But it's still a huge advantage to be upstream of everybody else. Well, how do we protect that?
One of the big ways in agriculture is we've got a lot of water that is technically allocated to irrigation. But if that's not being put to use, then it's subject to abandonment. And somebody downstream can file for abandonment against that water. And as it gets further downstream, you end up in a scenario where essentially you're shepherding water out of the state of Wyoming. And that's the last thing we want to do. So a lot of the initiatives when we talk about water really are in two categories. One would be aging infrastructure. Everybody heard about that Ocean Irrigation District tunnel collapse. We basically sent a tunnel through a mountain, and it, after 100 years, failed. That's extraordinarily expensive to fix. And then we have a million different PL 566 water management structures that are strung out across the United States. They're all coming up on 100 years of age as well. And so we have a tremendous amount of irrigation infrastructure that we need to start planning for. And it's going to be expensive. There's just no way around it. It's going to cost a whole lot of money. But the opposing side of that coin is, what will it cost if we don't keep that water in agriculture? Once water leaves ag, it never comes back. Once land leaves ag, it never comes back. So these are the types of things that we were discussing in water. One, make sure that we put that ag water to beneficial use, essentially putting a placeholder around it. Now it's reserved and we can protect that from downstream users to a degree. That's the best we can do. The other one is we're gonna have to start really doing a lot of heavy duty planning when it comes to irrigation water management and all of the infrastructure and structures that are out there that are really old and they need to be replaced. Core discussion number 3, centered around education and applied research. We have to make sure that we have a workforce that can come into agriculture. We talk about the challenges about, the next generation of farmers and ranchers and how they're going to get the capital to be able to leverage a loan or whatever it takes to get a land resource put together, but they also have to know how to do that. I guess every generation would tell you that the one behind them is stupid, right? I mean, I've been told that a lot, but, as I get older and I'm closer to the end of my career than I am in the beginning, I understand it now, but the reality of it is we're gonna have to really concentrate in the education sector about not just farming and ranching youth, but we're gonna have to look at all of the kids from town and make sure that they have an understanding of agriculture. So ag in the classroom, programs like that need to be bolstered more. And we need to start getting young people into our federal and state agencies. You might not think of it this way, but do you know what an advantage it is to have somebody that does policy work either in EPA, Fish and Wildlife Service, or one of the true ag entities like NRCS, FSA, Rural Development, but to have some knowledge base of farming and ranching as they go into these jobs. It's really nice to have somebody that is trying to implement the Endangered Species Act or the Clean Water Act that has a background in agriculture, because it's far too easy to look at all of the regulations and tell everybody what they can do. That's always the easy answer, but the truth of it is we need to make sure that people have a basic understanding that the best use of a resource when it comes to resource protection is usually agriculture. If you want to see water quality degrade, take that water out of ag and put a municipal use around it. Put an industrial use around it. Try any other use out on the landscape, and typically you'll see water quality decline quickly. It's true for soils, it's true for air, it's usually true for plants as well, or animals. So this is the kind of education we need to get out there. There's always a demand for applied research. What kind of crop development can we do that works better in droughts that are becoming ever more severe and frequent? What kind of development can we do for drought resistant pasture plants? I mean, all of these types of research questions are going to be extremely important for ag, especially in Wyoming. We're high, dry, cold, and there's not very many people that live here. So our ranchers and our farmers have to be tougher. That's just all there is to it. And then the last one of these pillars for agriculture and a challenge going forward is succession and diversification. Now this will surprise anybody here, but transferring land assets and agriculture assets from one generation to the next is extraordinarily important. It's very stressful and it tears families apart. The reality of it is we do a thing at the state fair every year about Centennial Farm and Ranch families, and anybody that has been able to keep that family operation together for 100 years gets a ranch sign and they get recognized. And that is an incredible achievement. It's hard enough to keep a shoe store going within your own family for even 2 generations. And if you start involving livestock, people get pretty passionate about livestock genetics and EPDs on bulls and that kind of thing, that it can become personal very quickly. And so one of the big challenges is, how do we as groups, support groups for farmers and ranchers, do a better job of advertising the resources that we have available to help you write a succession plan for that operation? All of us do it. Farm Bureau does it. Stock Growers has programs for succession. We at the Department of Ag have a mediation program that specializes in some respects in succession. But a lot of people don't want to talk about their own demise, and they don't necessarily want their kids to know what the succession plan is until they're checked out. That's a challenge for agriculture. So these are the types of things that we were talking about with the Ag Initiative, and some primers for all of you to think about. What are the mechanisms that we're going to need to put in place to make sure that agriculture can grow in the future? I think that Wyoming has a tremendously bright ag future. When you talk about developments for technology in ag, there's a lot of things that are coming along that can take advantage of some of our challenges, and I think it can close the gap for us a little bit. So you typically look to the Midwest and you have a monoculture of soils, and plants that have very deep soil. More dependable rain, they can grow a lot of things. But with a lot of artificial intelligence coming our way and a lot of different technology and planting equipment, and we have a bunch of different soils across the field, well, guess what? Now we can plant many different species in the field without having to do that manually. We've got ways to read soils maps and plant accordingly, and we can take advantage of those of a lot of variable conditions across a lot of our landscape that it wasn't feasible to do that before, but now it can be done a little bit easier. So are we ever going to catch up? Maybe not, but I think that gap will close, and we still do have some advantages out here because we don't have the pressure to develop that a lot of other places do. If you go just a little bit south of me, down the Front Range of Colorado, almost all of that high value cropland that was on the Front Range is gone, or it's under pressure of being repurposed for another use. So I do think we do have some inherent advantages in Wyoming, and looking forward to the discussion we have today. Thank you for the time.
I love to hear the categories that you talked about in the initiative, so thank you, Doug, for bringing all that up. Holly.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Holly Kennedy with the Wyoming Association of Conservation Districts. Thanks to Doug, he teed up a lot of the things I wanted to talk about here. And I'm going to kind of start off with talking about how conservation districts came to be. I think that's really fundamental to understanding the services that we provide to agriculture. So who are conservation districts, right? To understand our history and how we got to where we are and what we do for communities, we'll take a step back into American history and look at the Dust Bowls of the 1930s. We all know what the Dust Bowl was. We're all familiar with that part of American history. Years of drought, and then the combination of that with the advancement of agricultural practices, including tillage of soils, kind of created that situation of the Dust Bowl. And it really was a point in our history where it came into realization the need for conservation and conservation of our natural resources, and how can we look at how to do things differently, how to make our lands more productive, how to conserve those lands for future generations of agricultural production. And so out of that came a look at how do we make sure we have healthy soils, how do we make sure we have clean waters, and how do we make sure that our landscape remains resilient. So out of that came conversations that ultimately led to Congress passing what was called the Soil Conservation Act. And that was clear back in 1935 that happened, and that kind of started the ball rolling towards the development of conservation districts. But what happened first is they created what's called the Soil Conservation Service. And many of you in this room probably haven't heard of the Soil Conservation Service because we now call it today the Natural Resources Conservation Service, or NRCS. And through that, they recognized that, while we needed nationally led conservation, we also needed locally led voluntary conservation on the ground. And so from those discussions came forward the conservation district model and the conceptualization of conservation districts. And really the goal of that was to provide lasting solutions developed by the people who lived and worked on those lands every single day. People in your communities, in your hometown, familiar with exactly the resource concerns of your area. And so that led a nationwide effort to establish these conservation districts. And in Wyoming specifically, in 1941, the Wyoming State Legislature enacted what was called the Wyoming Conservation District Law. And so conservation districts are established in state statute. And currently today, there are 34 conservation districts that serve all 23 counties, statewide. And something really cool and unique about conservation districts is they are led by a board. We call them a board of supervisors. And those are locally elected officials. So the people that are driving the conservation work, if you will, in your communities are from your peers. They're locally elected officials that have been given that purview and that charge, if you will. Now you might ask, who are these people? What do they look like? They're farmers, they're ranchers, they're business owners, they're educators, they're community leaders. And so it's a diverse set of people and by structure, by design, that truly are there to represent the interests and concerns of your communities. And so, think about it as local people with local knowledge making local decisions. And so talking a little bit about, what we do. Conservation districts have been charged with conserving natural resources and helping address local resource concerns. So some of the areas that we focus on, some of the areas that we specialize in are things like watershed restoration and water quality. So districts work to restore streams. We work to stabilize eroding banks, improve riparian areas, monitor water quality, and implement projects that help improve overall watershed health for agriculture, for wildlife, and for downstream communities, for municipalities, for every citizen. We also work, and we work very closely with our federal partners on this one, on improving irrigation infrastructure, whether that's through things like conversion to center pivots, whether that's things like pipelines, solar mills, things like that. And so, kind of just a broad swath, right? We also have several districts that focus very heavily on forest health and wildfire mitigation. How do we protect our communities? How do we protect our resources from these emergent threats? We partner with landowners, we partner with counties, we partner with state agencies, we partner with federal agencies to help reduce hazardous fuel loads, to improve the resiliency of our forests, and then also to help communities prepare for how do we create that urban interface? How do we create fuel breaks? How do we create ways to help slow down or stop fires and protect crucial infrastructure? Another area that a lot of our conservation districts focus on is, we work really close with weed pest on invasive species management, especially in those post-wildfire situations or in areas where we're trying to improve rangeland health or forest health. I was talking to someone earlier today. One of our districts here is doing aerial sagebrush reseeding efforts following the wildfires in this area. They're really at the helm of a lot of these projects. And those projects benefit so many things, right? They benefit multiple species. They affect pollinators. They affect everyone in this room in your everyday life in the most microscopic and macroscopic ways, both. Really the ultimate goal is working towards that resiliency of the land. We also help in the areas of drought preparedness. Again, that resiliency tie, infrastructure improvements, grazing management practices, watershed planning, landscape scale conservation efforts that lead to these benefits. Another area of focus for a lot of our districts, and again, this kind of ties into what Doug was talking about with the agricultural initiative is that education piece and engaging the youth. We have several districts that have, for example, a street bake trailer that they'll take to fairs and expos and things like that and show kids how erosion works and how you can slow down water, how you can change the direction of water, how you can put impediments in the way, such as tree logs and things like that to help slow that water, to help slow down that erosion. Really cool, important things that maybe you don't think about innately, but when you look back, you're like, oh, I remember that at my local Ag Expo. That's what they were doing. Things like that. And so, just as we have to develop the next generation of agricultural leaders, we have to develop the next generation of conservationists too, and those conservation leaders. So that's something that conservation districts do really well. Talking about how does this work happen? How do conservation districts accomplish all of these things? Something that I think is always important to draw attention to is conservation districts are non-regulatory. We're locally led, we're voluntary. You come into our office, sit down with your local district and tell them your ideas, tell them things that you want to do with your lands. That's what they're there for. It's really cool to see all the different ways that they can bring a project together. And something really unique about conservation districts is they are so adept at leveraging funds, about bringing multiple partners together to get a project across the finish line, working across barriers, if you will. They work with multiple federal agencies, multiple state agencies, multiple county entities, multiple nonprofits and NGOs. They really are the people that bring a lot of people to the table and really oftentimes are the people that bring a project into fruition and across the finish line. So don't overlook your conservation district to help you with things that you want to get done on your land. I would say, the conservation district model is really built on a simple principle, and that is that conservation is the most successful when it's locally led, it's science-based, and most importantly, it's voluntary, right? Participants in the process that have come forward and really want to drive something down to the ground, if you will. Conservation districts, they're rooted in those local communities, but their impact spreads nationwide, community-wide, statewide. We really are here to help keep working lands working. With that, I will pass it off to our close federal partner. Oftentimes we're even co-housed within the USDA service centers and alongside NRCS, which is really convenient for you as landowners because we do work pretty heavily hand in hand with the NRCS.
Good morning, everybody. I am Jackie Byam. I am the state conservationist for NRCS for Wyoming, located in the Casper office. And I'm glad I went after Holly because you can substitute, take out conservation district, enter NRCS, and you have our story. The exact same with that. We are a private lands agency. We do focus on the local conservation, locally led, top or bottom up with that. So one thing with NRCS that may be different than other federal agencies is we lean heavily into the locally led process. So how we develop our programs, how we roll out our assistance is not exactly the same in Minnesota or Maryland or Florida. I have worked in 6 different states with the agency. It's always different. Same principles, different guidance because our local concerns are different than they are in those areas. We align very closely with the Cowboy State Ag Initiative as well with how we can provide that assistance to you all. So we recently, Chief Betancourt just stepped down, and so now we have a new chief, Chief Buckley, and we have updated just recently, 2 weeks ago, I think, updated our mission and vision statement and our motto. Our motto used to be helping people help the land, and now it is keeping working lands in working hands. And so hearing what Doug was saying and what Holly was saying, it really does fit into that larger picture of that. And Holly, as Holly mentioned as well, we are co-located. You come into the offices, you don't know if you're talking to an NRCS employee, you don't know if you're talking to a district employee or a partner that we have there as well. And that's why it works, because we are focused on our local needs there. We are completely voluntary. We are not a regulatory agency, I think, which is a big concern when you're dealing with federal agencies. We are voluntary. You work with us because you want to, not because you have to. And we provide what we call financial assistance through several different programs and technical assistance free of charge to our landowners, our producers in Wyoming and across the country. We have an easy way to think of technical assistance. It's your conservation business plan. How are you going to get through? How are you going to manage your grazing lands, your water? It's the business plan on how to get you to that point. And so we do this through several different programs. We have, and these are all Farm Bill programs as well. So funding comes through every year on that. Levels fluctuate based on everything going on. But we have I put all the acronyms down. It's going to take me a minute to spell these out for y'all. Our Agricultural Conservation Easement Program, Agricultural Land Easements, ALE. These are conservation easements that we put on private lands. We work directly with our land trusts across Wyoming. For permanent conservation easements, they help to protect, restore, and enhance working farms and ranches, so keeping those working lands in working hands. With that, we have our EQIP, Environmental Quality Incentives Program. This is the workhorse of our agency. It provides financial and technical assistance to improve soil, water, air, and wildlife habitats. These are individual contracts with producers. We are private lands, so we work mainly on the private lands portion of it. However, if there is a lease or basically a lease on federal lands, we are able to provide some assistance on those as well, as long as we are contracted directly with that individual. We have various funding pools throughout this program that support fire recovery, drought resilience, and infrastructure modernization. To go beyond EQIP, like once we fix it, we call it EQIP the Fix It program, then we have our Conservation Stewardship Program, CSP, that helps you enhance that and keep it continuing to be productive. It really promotes that long-term resource stewardship while improving the productivity of the land. We have our CPP, our Regional Conservation Partnership Program, which the NOFO just went out yesterday. I sent that to you, Drew.
Oh, good, thank you.
With that, and so it's a collaboration between NRCS and our partners. It brings additional dollars to the state outside of this. So we have agreements right now, projects with land trusts to do additional easements. We have one with the Wyoming Water Development Office for irrigation infrastructure, conservation districts and others to focus on those local needs of the partners to bring additional targeted conservation to that area. We have our watershed and flood prevention operations, better known as PL 566. This one is not an individual program. It provides technical and financial assistance to states, local governments, and tribal organizations to plan and implement watershed projects that address flood prevention, water quality, and resource conservation. So we have a lot of these projects across the state, across the country. As Doug mentioned, we have several projects going on now, either for new construction or rehab of the existing ones. We recently got approval for the Shoshone River watershed project that was sponsored by Howard Mountain Irrigation District. So again, that partnership with our non-federal agencies That's going to provide increased irrigation efficiency, improve public safety, and modernize the water management facilities within the Shoshone River. That's a $29.7 million project, and NRCS is providing 23.4. The partner is bringing the remaining 6 to the table on that. So that's the being able to match and bring additional funds in. Lastly, we have our EWP Emergency Watershed Program. So this also leverages local sponsors to protect working lands. It provides immediate technical and financial assistance to help Wyoming communities address watershed damage from flooding, wildfires, severe storms. In Wyoming, we've typically done EWP after flood events, our spring flood events on that. After the fires, we do look into it. We do have our sponsors submit a request in case there is something that we can address, because there's a 60-day request period after the event. So there's some nuance in with that. And so as an agency, we are not typically a disaster response. We help provide that resilience before. Let's fix it, let's get the waters out there, let's improve our grazing lands before a drought or before a fire. And we're also there to help recover afterwards. So if the worst does happen, it does come through, we can be there to help restore the property afterwards with that. And so, we do align with the initiative. Several things you might have put together, modernizing our aging irrigation delivery. We're able to do that through our programs. Infrastructure repair and replacement, improving on-farm irrigation efficiency, engineering and design support for infrastructure, water storage, structures for water control, local on the ground, help and coordination, our beginning farmer opportunities. We don't have a separate program for beginning farmers, but through our existing programs, we do have categories for beginning farmers and ranchers, socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers. That's a separate pool, dedicated funding to them, and typically provides a higher payment rate than what our general dollars do. And our conservation innovation grants for those applied research and implementation. So we have the SIG grants out. That opportunity is out. I don't think it's closed yet. But we also do agreements with the University of Wyoming. We've done a lot of wildlife-friendly fence design research with that to make sure that what we are doing is improving the wildlife corridors, keeping the livestock in with that. So we touch all of the areas in one way or another. And so with it, it's the state, federal, state, and local level. We all work together. We all have those locally led priorities. Yeah, I think that's what I got.
That's wonderful, as you're passing the mic. So I just want to remind everybody, if you were there this morning, we talked about the Grants Management Office houses the Grants Connect Hub. So all of these federal funding opportunities that are available are on our website. That includes NRCS, Rural Development, and Farm Service Agency. And Farm Service Agency is also here to talk about any programs that they may have. They have a lot as well. They're integrated into this. So bring us home, Cynthia.
Hi, I'm Cynthia. I'm with Rural Development. I'm the Business Programs Director. I'm located in the Casper office. We have Lillian here, who is our Community Facilities and Water Waste Program Director. You might be able to help answer some of the water questions. There are 29 agencies in USDA. In Rural Development, we have approximately 130 different programs. I work in business programs, which is dedicated to small rural businesses and agricultural research. We also have the community facilities and water and waste. We have RUS, which is our electric programs and our telecommunication programs. We have single family housing. We have guaranteed single family housing. We have our energy programs. They're currently paused. We're rewriting the regulations on that, so hopefully they'll be out next year. And we have multifamily housing as well. So the majority of our programs, we do a lot of guaranteed loans. I don't have any direct loan funding. So we do a business and industry guaranteed loan. Our lenders come to us for their applicants to just get loan guarantees on their loans for working capital, business acquisitions, purchase and installation of machinery and equipment. Up a little higher, okay. And expansion repair loans. We have our energy guarantee loan as well, just similar. We have our biorefinery, renewable chemical and bio-based product manufacturing guaranteed loan. We have rural business development grants, that's technical assistance to nonprofits. It helps with developing small and emerging businesses. On that one, we have our value-added producer grant for our agriculture producers. That's a pretty awesome grant. It helps agriculture producers expand their customer base and market value-added products. And it helps pay for processing, marketing, advertising, shipping, labeling, some supplies for farmers if they grow tomatoes and they want to make spaghetti sauce or something. It can help with supplies. It's a very good grant. It also has a planning grant, and that can help with feasibility studies, marketing plans, business plans. We have a variety of revolving loan programs. We have the MPEP, which is back out. That's the Meat and Poultry Expansion Program. That's a grant. It's for small processors and intermediate processors to expand, retrofit, grow the business. Primarily, you have to be processing beef, but you can also process other products. And then our timber production expansion program is kind of new. It came out in 25. We're trying to get another round. We still have funds in that program. And that one we partner with the Forest Service. And that is for wood processing facilities and sawmills to go in and cut down timber within a 250-mile radius and make products out of that timber. And that's to clear the forest to help prevent more wildfires. And that's pretty much what we have right now. But thank you.
Well, thank you. So that's a lot of programs. And my title is the Grants Integration Manager. So all of these things are integrated. It was so appropriate when the governor came up with that. So I've got questions, but I'm gonna open it up to all of you. What are your challenges? What are you looking for? What are your observations of where we're headed? What are your concerns? We'd like to hear it all, so throw it at us. Questions?
Raise your hand, I have a mic.
Yeah, don't make me ask my own, because I will. Questions? Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you for being up there today. We really appreciate the partnerships and collaboration. I feel like I should know the answer to this, but I don't. In Crook County, we are seeing an increase of population fairly quickly. It's not as bad as the Front Range, Doug, but it is kind of hurts our hearts seeing all the land fragmentation going on. And I guess my question, I know easements are an option, but the landowners that we've communicated with, they're kind of struggling through the easement process. And I guess my question is, outside of easements, are there any other ideas that you guys have that would help reduce fragmentation?
I would add to that, FSA has the Conservation Reserve Program, CRP, and those are 10 to 15-year contracts that provide additional flexibilities with that sets it, that puts some protections on there, not as good as an easement on that side, but it is an opportunity. Unfortunately, the statute in the Farm Bill requires our land easements or agricultural land or ALEs to be perpetual. So that could be something to be brought up through your representatives on getting some Farm Bill language changed on that side with X. Through our wetland easement program, we are able to do 30-year contracts, but we are not able to do that under ALE at this time. But I do know that the perpetual scares a lot of people. It does, and so looking at other programs. Doug, if you have any states already.
Yeah, part of our agriculture initiative had some alternatives for consideration by the legislature and the governor for programs that would be more aligned with habitat leasing. So that's a term you might have heard before, but it really is leasing habitat for different uses. That doesn't come with an in perpetuity moniker attached to it, because that is challenging sometimes when you get into the easement program. So there isn't anything that exists necessarily today, but we have been talking with Mr. Budd at the Wyoming Wildlife and Natural Resource Trust, along with some other outlets of consideration for maybe standing up some programs that fill a gap between very temporary and forever.
Right?
Because it is a challenge.
It is a challenge. That is the challenge, the forever. In regard to the producers or landowners who have concerns, what information should we convey? Who should we lead them to? Short of FSA, FSA is a good choice. Or I guess my question is in regard to the governor's initiative, what kind of timeline are we looking at for some of these solutions to the fantastic problems that you guys have identified?
I guess,
Besides us, I guess I don't know the land trust or the land trust that we have, if they have 30 or if they're all perpetual as well. So that might be some questions to have with them as well, because I do know they hold our easements, and I know they do some on their own as well, but I don't know what their requirements are, so that may be an option for one of the local land trusts.
We have a question over here, and then we're gonna hit the middle of the room, and I'll head
Hold on.
over there. Oh, wait, we have more.
Okay.
you know her. All right, I'll let you handle that later. Yes, question.
Hi there. So my parents operate a multi-generational specialty farm. And they're looking kind of now at their kids to find somebody to take it over. And they're finding that most of us aren't that interested. The profit margins are really low and the risk is really, really high. Every 10 years or so, there's some sort of disaster that takes 20 years to recover from. I'm sure it's familiar to a lot of people here. And we're finding that there isn't a lot of money or a lot of support in things like the Farm Bill for some of these specialty growers. So are you having any conversations at the state or federal level to how to support some more of these specialty growers? And have you seen some effective models for some of the specialty growers to band together to kind of use their voices more effectively? Because oftentimes they need quite disparate needs. If you're growing, if you're growing tomatoes, that's probably, you need different things than if you're growing some sort of specialty livestock or something like that. So have you had any conversations around that yet?
Okay, well, I guess I could start with that one. The Wyoming Department of Ag does receive a USDA block grant for specialty crops. So we have a specialty crop block grant that is specifically for all of those crops that don't qualify as commodities. So essentially we do have some cost share assistance for folks that do that type of farming, or want to take more control of the middle part of the supply chain. We have an additional program that is a one-time shot. I don't know if it will be renewed or not, but it's called the Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure Grant that we're administering right now. That was, as far as I know, only one-time funding for us, but we got $2.5 million. And that was for development of supply chains in the middle of it. So not production grants, but if you had something that would ease getting that product to market. So if you had packaging equipment, or if you need refrigerated trucking, if you needed help with a distribution facility or cold storage, that type of thing was eligible for the Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure Grant. There's discussions right now about renewing the Farm Bill, essentially. I mean, we've got part of it in the big, beautiful bill, but then there's Farm Bill 2.0 that still needs to be approved. They're hoping to get that done quickly. I don't see that happening. But that program is part of the discussion for whatever Farm Bill does get passed when it does. When it comes to succession, I don't have a better answer for you. I mean, the struggles that you talk about with specialty crops are all throughout the ag industry because the profit margins are low and there's a lot of challenges with that, and it's a lot to take on. So there are resources available through all of our industry partners, and with our mediation program, we can put you in touch with some specialists. So if you have specific questions about succession, my suggestion would be just jump on the Wyoming Department of Agriculture website, click on that mediation program, and we can hopefully come up with a tailor-made solution to get your questions answered.
Thanks. And Jackie, before we get to you, Jessica, FSA, I think, did have a couple programs that they wanted to respond to. And then I'll go to you, Jackie.
Hello, thank you for having us. We do have CRP, and it sounds like you are familiar with the Conservation Reserve Program. We were a pilot for the Yellowstone Migratory Corridor, and it was really successful. It extended that priority zone. And we worked, the idea behind it was working smarter instead of harder. And so we had partnered up with a bunch of the conservation groups that did easements, that already had these relationships formed with producers that might be interested, but were concerned about the lifetime easement. And so the idea behind CRP was the 10 to 15 year contract, so they could kind of dip their toe in it and see if they might be interested in something long-term. And so we did, that was one of our selling features, and I think that it was really successful for those owners that might, don't want to subdivide, but also are looking for some incentives. And then for the specialty crops on FSA's side, we do have occasional ad hoc programs. Currently, there's one specifically for specialty crops. It's the Assistance Specialty Crop Farmer Program that assists with temporary trade market disruptions and increased production costs. So checking out ad hoc programs we get for crops all the time, but also NAP, Non-Insurable Crop Disaster Assistance. We insure non-insurable crops. And we took a deep dive into this because Eilish here, who I'm gonna hand off to next, is the farm loan chief for the state. She had a producer who was interested in a greenhouse and a specialty crop operation. And so we had to dive into looking at insuring those specialty crops that maybe are producing for farmers markets. And it's not something that we typically do, but also we do, we did some research, and FSA can insure those crops. So as a way to maybe not have that 20-year recovery period you talked about. And something unique with NAP is that for beginning farmers, somebody taking over their parents' operation, those fees for those insurance, at least at the catastrophic level, would be waived. But we also offer buy-up coverage if you wanted a little higher coverage. Dr. Eilish.
Yeah, thanks, Annie. I guess going back to, how do we keep agricultural lands, in agriculture. FSA, in addition to the farm program side, we also offer low interest loans. There's a lot of misconceptions about that. It's not just for beginning farmers, just for first-time landowners. Anybody at any age can qualify for our loan programs. There's a lot of different eligibility factors, but providing low interest loans, decreasing that cost of capital for people to be able to either enter agriculture or stay in agriculture is a good way to mitigate some of that. And as far as the specialty crops operations, we can absolutely lend low interest rate loans to specialty crop producers. Again, this particular borrower makes $150,000 a year. He's a very legitimate borrower, and he's been able to expand his operation through an FSA loan program.
Thank you. Jackie.
And then I'll just add to that, our programs are built to be size and product neutral. We'll call it a product with that. However, we do, I'm going to put in a plug-in for the districts and the local work groups. So we are locally led. Through the local work group process, each district has an annual meeting to get the community members involved in what are your local priorities? Where do you want to focus on? So are we focusing on irrigation? Are we focusing on range management? Like where does the district, where does that local, where that local priority lies? And we roll that up into our state priorities as well. So that input we get from the local districts through the locally led process really does shape our programs. And so I encourage everyone in the room, if you are interested, reach out to your local conservation district, get on the invite list for the local work groups and have your voice be heard. Because we hear from who's at the table and we can speculate a lot, but we don't have a lot of the knowledge or the background or the need base if we don't have you at the table.
Hi, so my name is Jessica Lum-Williams, and I'm the grants manager at PEP and the Pell Chamber of Commerce way up in Pell, Wyoming. And I am here because I'm now running our local foods access project. So PEP, as an economic development nonprofit agency, we're very small, but our strategy has been to support the industries that we have in our area, make them stronger, help them become stable, offer more jobs. For the Bighorn Basin where we are, obviously ag is the big one. And that's where most people can agree. You know, they may not agree on how to do it, but they all agree that ag is important. One thing that I haven't heard you guys talk about is food growing. So a lot of our producers, we're like kind of the breadbasket of Wyoming, my understanding is. We have a lot of concentrated ag lands. We have a different kind of a water source. We have a lot of knowledge, and it's like our history in terms of growing crops versus livestock and ranching. But my question is that, you know, that we don't see a lot of food. You know, where's the local food? We are a food desert in Wyoming. Local food is defined as a 400-mile radius from where it's grown. So most of our food that we even give out in food security organizations, my understanding comes from out of the state. So to me, this is a huge economic opportunity that we're missing. And so I guess I would like to hear you guys talk about what efforts are being done at the local level, not for livestock, not for meat, but for crops, specialty crops, like this gentleman's talking about.
I'd like to start. Doug? Okay.
Yeah, there's no question. Specialty crops in Wyoming are a challenge. The reality of it is, you know, we don't have a produce industry in Wyoming because of our natural barriers, I guess you would call it. You know, most of the state is in that 14-inch precip zone would be average for us. And then we have the shortest growing season as a state of anywhere in the United States. So when it comes to specialty crops, typically you're going to need hoop houses. You're going to need some kind of way to extend the season. And we do cost share on those. So we do use our specialty crop block grant to be able to cost share with folks to build hoop houses, greenhouses, that type of thing, to try to grow that industry. But I think when we look at it from the agency standpoint, we do what we can. The challenge has always been, can a business thrive enough to continue to provide the quantities of produce that are needed for something like the school lunch program? Because that's something that we've also been involved in, is farm to school type of activities and trying to get local production into the school. And we've seen varying levels of success with that over the years. Always work at it really hard. But the reality of it is that the biggest challenge that we run into is sustainability in the amounts of produce that can be predictably delivered, either for sale or consumption by the school. So there's work that needs to be done, but I would say if we really wanted to close the gap, it's going to require a lot of infrastructure investment just to extend the season, and we need to make sure that that water is available to grow produce as well.
So this is another area where, you know, you see that patchwork of district focus across the state. So we actually have some conservation districts that do have some focus areas on this. And so I would encourage you to reach out to your local conservation district and see if they have resources for you. So some of our conservation districts have programs where they go into the local schools and help local schools grow produce. They're helping to educate the next generation, if you will, on gardening and growing different crops. Some of them offer advice on, you know, multi-crop planting and how to do that in your garden, what to plant with each other, things like that. As well as, you know, ornamentals and how to plan out your yard and things like that. And then we actually have some conservation districts that even run their local community gardens within, like, for example, their park system to help, again, with that growing food piece and helping serve communities. So definitely reach out to your local conservation district, because there might be some great resources there as well.
And I will add that at USDA, you may have seen this, you may have heard it mentioned, food security is national security. With that, and so at NRCS, we also have funding available for high tunnel, we call them high tunnels, the hoop houses. With that, we can't do greenhouses because we can't do electricity in these, because we are wanting to extend that growing season. The resource concern, Brian's gonna tell me if I'm wrong, but it's plant productivity and health.
So there is opportunities for that on that side. So yeah, there is, and we do have, we've had national agreements and some local Wyoming agreements for food sovereignty as well. So there are some grant opportunities out there that run through USDA and run through NRCS for that food sovereignty. I know we worked with the Wind River Food Sovereignty group there on a few projects as well. So the avenues are out there. They're not as, I don't want to say prolific, I don't know what word I'm looking for there, but they're not really out there at this time, but there are some, have been opportunities in the past and hope for additional opportunities in the future.
Thank you. So I know we are at time and this gentleman's been waiting. We've got one more question. What I'm going to encourage everybody to do though is when this is over, they will be around for a while. And we've also got FSA here. Please corner them somewhere and talk to them about your program. Quick one last question, Brett.
Yeah, I'm trying to be quick. So I work in a highly technical industry, providing opportunities for ag. We generate nanobubbles for water treatment, wastewater treatment, a number of opportunities for that. Talking with industry that's resistant to change, introducing these opportunities has been difficult. I'm curious if you have any suggestions on how we might be able to introduce this concept and integrate it into an ag operation that may be very hesitant to make any changes at all.
Doug?
I think an opportunity would be for new technology, right? We're looking at new technology and where it may fit in the agriculture sector. Our conservation innovation grants, so SIG is an opportunity. So what we do through SIG is basically, there's an idea out there, we test it through the research or the on-farm. So we have our classic, which is testing, doing the research, kind of coming up with this idea. And then the on-farm implementation side of it is like, we have it developed, we want to show that it works. So I believe that opportunity is currently open right now. I don't believe it is closed yet. Brian, do you know the date on that? Well, we'll get you the date on that. The Google machine, if you type it, if you put in Conservation Innovation Grants, NRCS, I'm sure you'll get to that. But that's, the new innovation is a big part of what we do. That's science-based, and that's a great opportunity, if not through another agreement process.
Doug, did you want to add anything before we wrap up?
The only thing I would add to that would be really short, and that would be that a lot of times the problem we run into with water is that you're asking somebody to forego an irrigation right in order to bring on something else, and so that can put their water right at risk. We have looked at various options of being able to say that any supplemental water would not be injurious to their existing water right. That's a long-term legislative discussion that needs to be had, and it needs to be taken very seriously. So it's something you want to wade into very cautiously. But when it comes to water rights, people are very apprehensive to replace their existing water rights because they don't want to put them at risk. But it's a discussion that we've talked about internally. Is there a way we can provide assurance while still doing some innovation and seeing if there's a practical way where we can protect and innovate at the same time when it comes to water? I don't have the answer yet.
So thank you. That's going to conclude our agriculture panel today. Please thank our panelists for coming. If they didn't get all the information or get to the level of the detail on the question that you had, they are going to be around. So please take advantage of all of this expertise throughout the day. Lunch will be